everybody, this is the Sliders Review. I'm here today to talk about Black History Month. The month that is a celebration of my people, because I am a black man and everything. And it's about all our accomplishments, all the oppression that we have gone through over like centuries of living in like America and stuff like that. And even till this day, we are still being oppressed. And so I'm here today to talk to you about certain characters or TV shows or episodes that revolve around Black History Month that I personally enjoy. So I'm here today to talk to you about Spyke from X-Men Evolution is a bad representation of black representation. See, here's the thing about X-Men Evolution. X-Men Evolution is the second greatest X-Men cartoon there is. The first one, of course, is X-Men, the animated series in the 90s. This came out in the 2000s when I was in probably my last year of high school towards college. And so in all 4 seasons, sadly enough, the 2 black people on the show really didn't get much to do. Storm was like a teacher at the school and she was like powerful, but she ended up getting her butt kicked every now and then. And she didn't have no storylines that focused on her except for one. Evan Daniels, who is, I think that's his name, Evan. Yeah, I think Evan Daniels, I almost got him mixed up with Evan Peters, the dude who played Quicksilver. Anyway, Evan Daniels, who plays Spyke, he was brought into the show for diversity. They have another black hero on the show because they're all white and stuff. And so in this series, they had Jubilee, but she was a minor recurring character. And they actually gave her some darkish type, like tan skin, like most Asian people do. So that's a good thing, because in the X-Men animated series, she looked white. And I thought she was white until I looked it up online one year. And so anyway, there aren't that many episodes that focus on Evan, except for probably 3. His introduction, this other one where he messes up big time, where Sabretooth almost kills everybody, and another one where he's fed up with people harassing him for being a mutant, and then he drinks this sports drink that agitates his mutation and causes him to look like monstrous, and then he quits the team. I was going to review that episode, but I just really don't. I'd rather talk about this instead, because when it comes to Evan Spyke, I do not like this character at all. I've never liked this character. They didn't give him no sense of character development, growth, until that episode where he quits the team and leaves the show in the 3rd season. And he doesn't reappear until the 4th season in 2 episodes. And one episode they track him down because he's become kind of like this eco-terrorist type person. And then in the next episode, it's the finale where he helps a brainwashed Storm, who became one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. This is a really good series, but they did not do the black characters justice at all in this show. And Evan is evident of that. Now, look at Evan. Do you see anything kind of interesting about him? Now, like I told you before, he was brought in for diversity, very similar to that of John Stewart when they added him into the Justice League. Now, with John Stewart, they let you know straight up that this dude came from the projects and he worked his way up into the military and then became a Green Lantern. He struggles with being a Green Lantern because he wants to know, is he really a hero or is it just the ring? And so that's pretty good and stuff like that. And at least they showed him coming from the project, so they gave him some type of black realism in that. However, with Evan, there's no such thing. First things first, they gave him blonde hair. Which, yes, some black people do have blonde hair, but they have to dye their hair blonde. I'm not knocking black people who have blonde hair, but what I'm saying is they gave him blonde hair. They could have gave him black hair. They could have gave him brown hair, but they gave him blonde hair. Now, also let me just say that Evan Daniels, Spyke, he's a made-up character for the show. Very much like X-23, because he's not in the comic books. However, there is a character similar to his named Morrow, and she has bone spikes that shoot out her body and stuff, very similar to that of Spyke. So they pretty much just gave her powers and then later on somewhat of her appearance a little bit. And so he has blonde hair. On top of that, he rides a skateboard. On top of that, He dresses like a white person and kind of like a skater dude. On top of that, he I think he listens to music that most black people don't listen to. And on top of that, he uses slang terms that are white slang terms, like dude, and like, oh, totally, man, and stuff like that. And on top of that, there's nothing that shows any type of representation of what a black person is. And I'm thinking to myself, why would you add this black character that you created for this show, but you made him white? And the reason for that is because they were trying to appeal to that of a white audience. Because in comic books, it's predominantly white. And the first black superhero came out in 1966, which was Black Panther. And even though they bring in black superheroes every now and then in shows, they tend to want to focus more on a white audience and everything, so that it can please them, because the fan base is majority white. But there are also other people of color that are part of this fan base too. I remember when I saw him, see, I grew up with the 90s X-Men series, and my favorite X-Men's are Wolverine, Gambit, and Nightcrawler. Sometimes maybe Rogue, but her voice kind of gets on my nerves. But for the most part, those are my three favorites. And so as a young black kid, I had no like black male superhero to look up to when it came to the X-Men series. And so when it came to those three I just named, I love their powers. And so when I saw this towards the end of my high school years in college, going into college, I was like, oh wow, a little black superhero and stuff. And his powers are really cool. He shoots out bone spikes out his body. And that's like a really cool power, Then when he had his mutation flustered, his bone spikes started turning into like bombs and everything, similar to that of Gambit's powers. But the thing is, as I was watching this, I could not relate to this. Well, I could relate to him, but I couldn't relate to him as in, are you sure you're black? You know what I'm saying? Because they wrote him very white and everything. And so it was kind of like, it was cool. I'm thinking to myself, oh man, if I was to be in the X-Men, I would want to be like him. But then I don't want to be like him because they wrote him so corny. They wrote him as, he's the youngest of the X-Men. He's a new recruit, just like Kitty and just like Nightcrawler. And those three are teenagers, and they never fought before until they joined the X-Men. Now, when they gave Kitty and they gave Nightcrawler their costumes, they gave them individual costumes. Now, when they gave Spyke his costume, I was like, okay, that's a pretty cool costume, until I saw what that costume later on represented. The X-Men uniform they gave him is that of the in-training uniform used by like younger new recruits like Iceman, Wolfsbane, Cannonball, all the younger, little tinier kids and stuff. And so that's kind of insulting. Everybody on the team can have their own individual costume, but he has to have the one where it's an in-training costume. And it doesn't make no sense because Kitty and Nightcrawler are very inexperienced, and they got recruited too around the same time he did. And so my thing about him is like, okay, I'm not knocking people, like if a black person wants to ride a skateboard. I used to have a skateboard. I'm also not knocking them for using white slang. I use white slang. But see, I know why I do it. I do it because I grew up in a predominantly white neighborhood, and I went to a predominantly white school, and I watched shows because there wasn't that many black shows around. And so when you don't have cable, there's nothing but a bunch of white shows on TV. And I used to always hear Michelangelo talk. So that kind of got ingrained. So all that got ingrained into like my brain and everything. And so, there are people like that, but I still know I'm black, and I still listen to like other types of music. And, and I know like all this like other stuff that like black people have to go through. Problem is with him is that he's a fictional character who was written by white people to be white. And so that's completely different. They chose to make him that way. And it's really insulting. And so it's kind of like, it's cool. He looks cool. He has a cool costume. But they did nothing with, he has cool powers, but they did absolutely nothing with the character at all. And like, Nothing. And then when they realized people didn't like him, they wrote him off the show and everything. Then the creators showed us how much they cared about Spike because after they wrote him out of the third season, they replaced him with fan favorite Iceman, who happens to just be white. Similar, and then it's weird because it's like there is Aqualad from Young Justice. He has blonde hair. He has blonde hair too. And see, but in the comic books, when he was first being introduced, they gave him black dreads and they gave him a different backstory. And the one on the show, who was created around the time that the comic was, and they wanted to be different from that of the comic, so they gave him blonde hair. Now they did the same thing with like Spike. They added him for diversity, and since he was in the comic book, they figured, hey, this is the best time, because there is no other black person on that show until they later came in, only be written off. And so with him, at least he's the leader of the team and he leads the group. Now I can accept that the fact that he doesn't have no black vibe flavor to him because he grew up around fish people. He's half fish, he's half human. But then why did they have to give him blonde hair? Of course, to appeal to that of a white audience. And see, the problem, and I like Aqualad more than I do Spike, but the problem with both of them is they don't have no black vibe to them. Nothing makes them feel like they are like a little black kid or a teenager, because that's what they are. Like, instead of like making Spike a skateboarder, why couldn't they make him play basketball or something like that, you know? Like, if you want a good example of like a black superhero team, then you go to Static from the Static Shock cartoon. He had lots of black flavor in him and a huge black vibe. They made sure they added that into the cartoon because that's what the comic was about and everything. And ironically, now the Aqualad in the comics has now been whitewashed to look just like his counterpart from Young Justice. He now has blonde dreads instead of black, and he now has lighter skin. And as you can see, Aquaman now has tattoos similar to that of Jason Momoa, yet his skin and the hair has not been changed. Now, there is another Spike in the X-Men comic books. He debuted 1 year after X-Men Evolution, and he seems to be based off of the Spike character from the cartoon series. But they have now changed his appearance to look more black with black hair and dreads for better appropriation. Spike has also been introduced into 2 X-Men movies, played by 2 black actors, and as you can see, their hair is not blonde for obvious reasons. Happy Black History Month, everybody. I'll talk to you later. Bye.